Welcome to our podcast, Navigating the Healing Path with Maggie and Nikki. Over the course of our first season, with episodes uploaded every Tuesday, we will be discussing the instrumental building blocks to living an authentic and heart-based life. It is our desire and intention that through our channelings and conversations, we can offer a feeling of relief, connection, and hope for those walking this challenging path. So if this podcast feels like it interests you or resonates on some level, then we'd be honored if you stuck around to listen.
This week, we're diving into the buzz topic of boundaries.
Fuck your boundaries!
Is what a disrespectful person would say. But fortunately, that's not us. We are here to begin our conversation around discovering and implementing healthy personal boundaries.
If we have to. Welcome back, friends and spirit family.
Welcome.
We're so glad that you are joining us. So if we just can take a moment and connect with each other through our breath, and we can ground our energy. So receive a nice deep breath and release. Another deep breath. And release. Anything you're doing, anywhere you are, thank you for being here. Thank you for connecting with us and engaging in this lovely conversation that we are going to have about boundaries.
Woohoo!
It's a very
big
big
one.
topic. Very big topic.
Yes, it really is. So much to it. Such importance.
Yeah.
Major stepping stone.
And as we were discussing boundaries in general, we realized that it's very extensive. And this might actually go over 2 weeks so that it's more digestible. So we'll take it as it comes.
Yeah. But I guess with the first part, we'll be talking more about conceptual aspects of boundaries, like an overall.
Yeah, like what is it? How does it differ from other, like, walls or attachments or, just what are boundaries? Why are they important? Why should we care? Why is it something that we need to work on? So,
yeah, especially as people on a spiritual path that are prone to being, I guess not prone to being empaths, but who are empaths and are prone to maybe some codependent patterns and people-pleasing habits. Boundaries have been huge for me, my growth, and learning to become more myself.
Boundary as a healing tool and a coping mechanism is for a wide variety of people, from those who are highly sensitive peoples, those on a spiritual path, those on a healing journey, or just anybody. I really feel like this is beneficial for our mental health and keeping ourselves and our energies safe from those that would like to use or abuse those lovely gifts that we come in and we're here to share.
Yeah. Boundaries are very much so for everyone and anyone.
Mm-hmm.
They just help us feel, I guess it is kind of like just a way for us to navigate and allow ourselves to be in the world in ways that we're meant to.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out boundaries.
Shout out boundaries.
They're fabulous and super difficult and very complicated. Let's dive into it.
Boundaries. First, I would like to differentiate from my experience and my perspective, the difference between having walls and armor up around our hearts and ourselves and having a boundary. So with walls, everything stays out. That's what it's meant to do. It's meant to protect you, to keep out all the bad things. But because it's keeping out all the bad things, it's also keeping out the good things, the connections with others and the love and the being appreciated and valued. But over time, as we learn to lower our walls and practice being more vulnerable and being our authentic self, it can become increasingly dangerous when you are wanting and desiring to be your true authentic self around unconscious or harmful, toxic people, groups, what have you.
Mm-hmm.
So you need something to replace the wall that has kept you safe, but also disconnected. And when you want to feel and connect more, you need something to take its place. And that's where the boundary comes in. Boundaries are like kind of like an onion, where there's layers of boundaries. And each layer in just requires more respect to get to the center, to get close to you, to get to the vulnerable part where you're vulnerable, right? So they're permeable. People can come and go based on their level of trust, like where they are, how safe are they being respectful of your of this boundary or what have you.
Quick little side note
Mm-hmm.
from me. The book called Unfuck Your Boundaries by Faith G. Harper is about building better relationships through consent, communication, and expressing your needs. And this has been a major foundational tool for me, along with the help of you, Nikki. Thank you. It's been a very foundational and educational tool for me to start navigating my boundaries as I have over the last couple years. So I highly recommend this book, and I have taken some notes on different sections of the book, and I will be referencing this in and out throughout the podcast, just for people's knowledge. I highly recommend.
Very nice. And I was flipping through, and I'm excited to actually order this because it's pretty extensive. Even though it's not a really big book, it like covers a lot of ground.
Yeah.
And lots of things like to consider and to look at. And you said there's even a workbook, so that's amazing. I love that.
Yeah.
From what you've read, what is your understanding of boundaries? In your experience, like how would you describe it?
Honestly, how we were just saying that boundaries are for anyone, they're a way for us to feel safe in the world. It's like our own personal intuitive like rule book and guidebook for what we're okay with and what we're not okay with, which is it's a very broad
Right.
It's a very broad thing. And there are all types and structures and different violations and all these things. With that, can I actually share a couple of like the different structures? Because you used the word permeable boundaries.
Uh-huh.
So the book references the different structures of boundaries after all the different types. For types, there's physical, property, sexual, emotional, relational, intellectual, spiritual, and time boundaries. So
Yeah.
these are all different categories and ways and different things that we need boundaries around that everyone has, which are vital to our existence. And there's a ton of overlap. But you use the word permeable boundaries. So with this book, it defines permeable boundaries as that's kind of where anybody can kind of come in and like kind of walk over your boundaries. Like with that structure of boundaries, it can just usually lead to getting walked on. So the term flexible boundaries is where this author would use the word, like how you use permeable.
Mm-hmm.
The goal
She
is
was
to
using
have flexible boundaries, which is the nice middle ground between having rigid boundaries, which are those walls, which is a major defense mechanism
Right.
for people where it's like, oh my God, like some can be too strict. But of course, we do need some rigid boundaries. I mean, like, don't punch me in the face. I mean, don't steal the money out of my bank account. You know, like that's going to be a rigid boundary for everyone.
Yeah.
But permeable boundaries is the opposite end of the spectrum, where it's like, oh, somebody can come in and kind of like take advantage. And it's like, oh, well, I'd prefer if you didn't do this, but if that's what you really want, like that's okay.
Because that actually doesn't even feel like a boundary to me then.
Yeah, no.
That's not even a boundary if it's permeable. See, like,
Right.
I hear what they're saying, and I love the differentiation because, you know, words are powerful.
Yeah.
It's important. It's when I use that, because this was the way that it was explained to me, it's more like if I met somebody new, and I don't know them from Joe, right? And I'm going to keep them at the edge of my boundaries until they prove themselves trustworthy. So the more I get to know them and I can feel them out and their intentions and their frequency and all of that, the closer I allow them to come inward and to my center, like closer to me. So it's permeable, and then I'm not keeping anybody out unless they resonate with a certain amount of respect.
Right. Yes.
But that was the way that I was using that. But I can see where they're coming from with that.
Yeah.
And yeah, flexible.
There are also a lot of times where permeable boundaries are totally a thing. I mean, I feel like you and I have pretty permeable boundaries where, you know, sometimes like if like I have a boundary of, I don't know, like if I don't want to be called past a certain time, like in the evening, but if somebody calls and like that's the only time frame that they have to call, and you do like the person and you do want to connect, like that's where it's permeable, where you
Right.
can
But that
push
even
it.
feels flexible too.
Yeah, that's true.
You know what I mean? So to me, it's interchangeable, but I can see needing to specify, like, this is what it looks like when it's being taken advantage of,
Yeah.
you know?
For
So
sure.
I totally get that. But that's why, like, you can let somebody close to you, but the moment that they're either taking advantage or they're not proving themselves trustworthy, then they're back outside
Yeah.
the farthest boundary. And so,
Yeah, that's where
Yeah.
the rigid would definitely,
yeah.
you'd probably need to bring that in. But I mean, these are all just like very like broad blanket definitions to try
Right.
to help like
And
pin
language,
down
you know
and
what I mean?
learn.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all just like a foundational tool. But I
Uh-huh.
mean, these all like the big thing with like any of this information in this book is that it's such a long journey, and all of our boundaries and the types will change over time, just the same way that like attachment styles change over time. As you learn more information and you learn more about yourself,
And you heal things.
and you heal things, yeah, then your boundaries will change for sure. And
Because
people
you
will
won't
come
need
and
to have a
go.
boundary over something anymore if you've healed that.
Yeah.
Sometimes boundaries are just temporary. Like if you have a certain trigger word, like my husband, he was no longer allowed to use, "You're acting childish." That was a huge trigger for me because that was unfair. That was used against me as a child.
Right.
Being told you're being childish when you're a child. Like, yeah, but I was told that's bad. So that would just shut me down. It wasn't that I'm like, no, you can't say that to me ever. You know, it wasn't like that. It's just like, look, if you want me to stay present and not run away from you, I need you to keep that not in this conversation.
Right.
There's a better way to communicate with me. So I had established a boundary once I identified that I was actually a trigger, that it was crossed. And that's also what I learned a lot when you're discovering your boundaries, when you don't even know what they are. This is part of the fun, we'll put it, of discovering your needs
Yeah.
and boundaries is oftentimes they're found by accident. You don't know it's there until someone's already crossed it. And so it becomes of utmost importance, who's in your environment? Who are you allowing to be around you? And it helps you discern the type of person based on how you respond to their words and like how they treat you. So if somebody crossed my boundary and I said, "Oh, ow, I did not like that. That upsets me." If they would meet me with like, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." And it's like, let me step back. That's respectful. That's like, "Oh wow, look what we discovered. Let me figure out how to get around this." But if someone's like, "Oh God, why are you so sensitive? It was just a joke."
I was about to bring up the main trigger for me for a long time was, why are you so sensitive? And been working on healing that one.
Yes. because you are.
Yeah.
Because-
Reframing it into a superpower.
Yes.
Being like, hell yeah, I'm sensitive.
Yeah, you know things without people speaking it. Like, that's amazing. And that's also why they didn't like it. Why people would admonish us and say, get a thicker skin, you know? And like, what is this a joke?
I'm
Why can't you
heavily
take a
eye-rolling
joke?
right now.
Heavy eye roll.
Yep. I've gotten that so much.
But it conditioned us to not trust ourselves, to not trust our feelings or value ourselves, or like, oh no, it's my fault. I'm the problem. And there's all sorts of trauma and mental conditioning that is really detrimental to life, to your experience of life. So you become guarded and super hyper vigilant and all, like, just a whole slew of things.
Right. Yep.
So having respectful people around you is paramount, because I don't think I no longer settle for less than what I desire in relationships. I won't sacrifice myself anymore. I'm allowed to say no. You know, I can trust my feelings about somebody. I can tell when people are being deceitful or lying because I can feel it. I can see it, whether they admit it or not. I'm not going to confront them necessarily if they're not aware. That's not my job. But I can distance myself or keep myself in a particular space.
That's so powerful. And I love that. And I'm on that path, and I aspire to be as firmly at that point as you are.
Nice.
Because this whole thing is really, really confusing, and there's a lot, and it's especially hard when you have people in your life that are maybe not doing the same work and are maybe not as aware of their words and actions. And so this is where all of this stuff gets real muddy and real confusing real quick.
It does.
Which we'll probably explore in part 2.
Yeah.
More so.
Yeah, it's real. It could be really challenging when you begin to do this, because people aren't going to understand, why are you acting like this? Why are you being so different? It's just like learning how to hold space for yourself, for your emotions, the needs that you have, and being able to express those. That's a real skill, and that's real power. Being able to be vulnerable and saying, like, this hurts me. Please don't do that. If people look at you like you're crazy, like, what's wrong with you? Nothing's like, there's nothing wrong with this. Maybe they're not for you. It's up to you what you're willing to settle for and what you're willing to live through, but you don't have to.
Yeah. Something that this book talks about is how uncomfortable and weird it can be when you first start setting boundaries, because we currently live in a society where it's patriarchal, and the term she uses is rape culture, where like there's hardly consent for anything in the world that we live in. And when we first start using like certain language and setting these boundaries, that in and of itself can be triggering and confusing for people, because it's so new and it's so foreign, and it's like, I didn't grow up in an environment where like my parents were like taking accountability for how they felt and owning up to like their actions. So what the heck are you doing? And it can kind of look and sound and feel really silly, but also really scary and challenging when you first start setting boundaries in your life with people. And there's so much to it, but it is part of the process. It's a whirlwind, and it feels very, very strange when you start setting them.
I feel like even as we've been discussing this, there's nothing even like really concrete yet. It's still like etheric. It's still possibility and potential, and like it's just something you get to experience through the evolution of your healing journey. You know, like it's a choice that you get to make for yourself when you're ready to be accountable for your own happiness, your own reality. And it's hugely important when you're manifesting whatever reality it is that you would like to live in. you know, because like we're just sort of taught through culture and the family dynamic of status quo. This is just how it is. Get with the program. And for so many of us who are rebels and healers, who are like, this program sucks. No, thank you. I will not be participating in this program any longer. And that's why the boundaries come in. It's just like, okay, I can see where you're coming from, that this is the engagement, this is the process, this is the program, this is how you want me to behave, but I'm no longer willing to participate as that role in your life. And it's about becoming autonomous, becoming whole and integrated instead of sacrificing pieces of you for the comfort of other people. So who do we get without boundaries but our people pleasers and codependents and people who have been traumatized and manipulated and harmed and abused? So it's for those people who have been harmed by society and family and everybody that boundaries are for you to practice to keep you safe from those that would look to take advantage of you.
Mm-hmm.
And what's, I think, like really hard in the healing process is also looking how, that's even hard to say, is like how we're complicit in our own reality, even of abuse, because we're willing to receive it. We're willing to believe that person when they say you're a terrible human being, how can you be doing that? Or don't, like who are just trying to manipulate you or gaslight you. Like that's their issue. But you're participating. So the question becomes, do you want to participate anymore? But a lot of people feel like they don't have a choice.
Right.
This is just how it is. But that's the program. When you feel like you don't have a choice, then you're stuck. So, yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of, I guess, like neuroscience and nervous system stuff when it comes to like boundaries in those programs too, because when we're faced with like something triggering, let's say like abuse or something, our like amygdala can go off and that sets our like fight or flight response or freeze or fawn. Same wavelength.
We're
gotta
very
add all of them.
Yeah.
I'm a fawner myself.
Ah.
But what the book goes into, I'm going to be a total broken record. I'm just going to be like absolutely referencing this book like left and right. But it has such good information and I've learned so much. She talks about how our bodies do go into like these different reaction responses in the face of triggers. And that's why it's so hard for such a long time to even realize like, oh, you do have a choice in how you are showing up for yourself and how your relationships are affecting you. And that's what's really difficult because it doesn't feel like we have a choice, especially when shit gets lit up inside of our nervous system and it goes, oh, like it's attached to a program and it goes, oh, we need to fight right now. Like this is how we dealt with it before. Oh, I need to flee, need to run away. Or you just like completely freeze and shut down. And so back to the self-awareness from last week.
I heard
shout
that
out.
coming. I did. I'm like, bring it. You're going to bring it. Yep.
Yeah. That's where like it's such a key, and self-awareness and learning to begin to even learn what boundaries you want and need in your life is such a long, quiet, internal process. I mean, you can't even know what your body needs or wants if it's constantly in like a fight or flight reaction.
Totally stressed out. Adrenals and fatigue.
Yeah, you literally don't have any other option in that moment. So tying in like the self-awareness and beginning to just like slow down and quiet and create a more safe space for your nervous system will then kind of help along, I guess, like the very first process of boundaries in general. Let me know if you agree with this or not. But the first step is practicing self-awareness and listening to what boundaries your body brings up. So just that observation for a while, I think to me is like the first step in understanding and starting to learn what your boundaries are.
Totally. To start, I don't know, I feel like jumping into like, just to start the boundary work, it's really small. It doesn't need to be huge. It's not like you have to identify everything right away and write everything down. For me, the boundary started by just holding space for me around myself during meditation, right? That was, I learned how to create space and do some mental magic and create a boundary and like a protective aura, if you will.
Like an energetic boundary.
Exactly. So that was where I got to feel just me without the influence of anybody else. Because I'm a highly sensitive person, I can feel deeply. That's like one of my strongest senses. So it's like I feel everything so deeply, and then I can see things like my third eye. Like, so I have feeling and then vision, right? So for me, it started just like helping to create space for myself so I can learn to feel myself, so that when I'm out in the world and I create my little protective bubble, if something comes in, I get to stop and ask myself, is this mine or is this someone else's? Because I have a boundary up, right? Like nobody's energy is allowed to pass through here. This is my space. But if something does come in, I get to ask, is this mine or is this someone else's? I was feeling fine 5 minutes ago. And then this person walked in and now I feel like this. And if I can bring my awareness to, oh, it's definitely coming from outside of me, then I can release it. I get to detach. I get to do a process and be like, okay, that's not mine, that's theirs. You know, so it's like it becomes a healing tool. It's a coping mechanism. It's a way to protect ourselves and our energy from being vampirically taken from us. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just a process of discovery and figuring out, okay, I recognize this is what I'm feeling and I'm willing to do this or give it this much time. Like if I know, like, because we're all on different paths and like we're on different places. And I still like to connect with some of my old people, but they might not be as consciously aware as I am or self-aware, you know, what have you. And so I will give that a time limit, you know? So like I'll give this person an hour. I would love to connect with them for an hour and then my energy is going to be done and then I get to go. This is a boundary. Like you said, time is a boundary. Mm-hmm. So I still want to support people who I've known who want to connect with me, but I hold a space. I have a boundary. It's implemented with time, but it's all love and it's unconditional love. I love you where you are, but I'm going to be over here. And this was great. Thank you so much. So yeah, start small.
Yeah.
Doesn't need to be everything all at once.
Yeah, that's very true. So a question that was coming up as you were saying all of that, for me, I think where I've struggled the most with setting boundaries, but where I feel like I do need the most boundaries is with emotional, relational boundaries. Because like you, I am highly sensitive and often a sponge for how other people are feeling and what they're thinking. Mm-hmm. And I can accidentally take that on as my own unknowingly. So I guess for you, when you started doing this work, you're obviously like setting the time boundaries, but do you feel like the emotional, relational boundary setting was kind of like one of the first major ones that was brought up for you that you needed?
That's probably like the farthest back. So like I started with just like around myself for meditation, just so I can begin to clear my field and myself.
Right. From other people's emotions and energies?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But because I was a little codependent, you know, I had to be a certain role and make sure I did all the things right and anticipate all the needs just in case somebody gets upset about something. But detachment actually helped me with that, because once I'm in my boundary and I've established it, if they don't respect it, the only solution for me is to detach. That is not mine. That is theirs. If they have an issue, this is not mine. And so that was actually really hard for me, because that made me feel cold and a bad person for not caring about their feelings. But that was the program. I can't speak my truth because my truth hurts their feelings, because they don't want to take responsibility for their behaviors and actions, why my feelings were hurt to begin with. Mm-hmm. So it's like this what do they call it? Like a catch 20 or
22.
catch 22. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. So it's like, but that's why you get to decide if you want to participate in that program, in that game. There's no wrong answer. It's just make a conscious choice. Don't be coerced or manipulated. I mean, you can. I don't care. Like, it's life. You know, you could live it any way you want. But for me, it was painful. It became increasingly painful to stifle and repress my truth and like my feelings. So people can't handle my feelings and my truth, then there isn't room close to me. There's room in my space, but you might not get all of me. Because I no longer receive abusive relationships, unbalanced relationships. No abuse. That's like, I have one rule. One rule. No abuse of any sort for me. Then we're cool. I'm really easy. Like, I really feel like I'm an easy person.
Yeah, you're super chill. I haven't had any issues so far.
But you're really respectful.
Thank you.
You know?
I try.
You're really open.
Try as much as I can. It's exactly how I want to be treated in return.
Mm-hmm.
It's vital.
Yes. Yeah. And it really does boil down to that golden rule, is treat others the way you want to be treated.
Mm-hmm.
So I treat others respectfully. Like, they're autonomous. You're your own person. I'm not trying to control anybody. And that's the thing about boundaries. And I know that this has been out there, and so you're going to hear it. I'm going to say it again. Respectful people don't mind boundaries. They're like, hey, thanks for letting me know. I won't cross that. You know, because they're going to have theirs and they want you to respect their boundaries.
Yep. Right?
People who have issues with you, as you begin to establish these things, like, please don't bring up this topic. It doesn't go anywhere. It only hurts me. So please leave this off of the conversation docket. If they have a problem with it, they were directly benefiting in you not having it. You were feeding them something. You were participating in a role that you were made to play for them. Mm. And the moment that you're like, no, they're gonna fight. They don't want to lose that. They don't want to lose that source of fuel, of whatever it is that they're looking to receive.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a very common trait with what the book labels as a high conflict personality.
Yeah.
Which narcissists fall into this category. But I mean, only like 1 to 2% of the world are like actual, like, diagnosed narcissist. Mm-hmm. She uses the term high conflict personalities just to explain anybody who has a response in like a situation where they're presented with conflict. All it means is just their solution to conflict is to throw in more conflict. Mm-hmm. And then so that can just create like really heightened and triggering situations for all people involved.
Right, because that's not even like, and I see how narcissism is like totally like a hot word right now. Like, everybody's wanting to throw it around.
It's thrown around left and right, which I understand. I fell into that trap as a recovering codependent.
Fuck all narcissists, man.
Yeah.
They hurt us. Yeah. Use and abuse. Make them anyway, I can go on. But anyway, I don't need to.
But let's switch that as a society to high conflict personality.
I like that because it's actually really a lot more encompassing and realistic. Mm-hmm. I can imagine and remember times when I'm sure I would have been perceived as a high conflict personality.
Yeah, same.
The unhealed individual can very much embody that, especially if they don't have the emotional coping tools to regulate their emotions and like their nervous system. They're going to be highly combative. Mm-hmm. If you have a traumatic upbringing, you're going to have a greater need to control your environment and everybody in it. Yeah. Which can be pretty conflicting and combative and like all of that.
Yeah. But that's their method of safety for them.
Right. So that's just a negative coping mechanism. So there's healing potential And that's what I understand, which is why I pressure nobody. Nobody has to heal for my benefit. This is one of the things that I got to let go of, like all the healing fantasies of like the ones that have wronged you will see the error of their way and reconcile and be like, I'm so sorry, I hurt you.
Yeah, this
and
big
it's
like climactic like hero's journey.
But ultimately, for my own sake and to like help disconnect that codependence, is I realized I am not responsible for anybody else's healing.
Yep.
So I put up a boundary even in like, because I'm a natural giver. I've been massaging people since I've been 8 years old because I just have a touch, you know, like it's a gift of mine. But because I was a happy little codependent wanting to make everybody happy so that maybe I can get something in return, subconsciously, I didn't know this at the time, I was just a giver. This is what I was told. This is what I was taught. Oh, you're so good. You make me feel so good. Can you just touch me? I'm like, yes, of course I can. But I had to end up putting a boundary around that gift because it was never being balanced, or very rarely was it being balanced. And so now, if you would like my healing touch, you must ask and make an appointment. Then you're able to receive what I'm giving.
Yeah.
I no longer just give to try and hope that someone can seize me, like that they see me and, oh, Nikki, you're so valuable and I'm so, you know, like that external validation.
Yeah, that's crossing both of your guys' boundaries by doing it in that way.
Yeah.
Whereas the way that you are doing it is offering them a chance. You're offering them a choice, and then it puts the power in their hands to do what they want for themselves. Which is exactly how you approached me with meditations. And it worked fabulously.
It's an
and
invitation.
I felt a lot more, because it was an invitation, it felt a lot more like safe, and I'm like, oh, I can make this choice for myself.
Yes.
My boundaries aren't being crossed. It's up to me.
I just
lovely.
open the space, and whoever wants to come into that safe space is invited. Just the requirements are respect and communication and a balance of some sort, you know? So the give and the receive is very important.
Yep, definitely. There's so much to this conversation. My mind is kind of like hopping all over the place of like the different aspects and things that we can talk about with it. But I was just flipping through. There are a good amount of examples. I'm not going to like read them all off or anything. Again, if anybody's interested, pick up the book. But there's a lot of great like starter examples of like internal versus external boundaries or boundary violations. I mean, and there are some really small things where it's like, this work really is a two-way street, where I feel like the first part of understanding boundaries is you're doing it for yourself, where you do take that time away from other people. You start cultivating that space within for you. And then as you re-enter the world, you start noticing like what triggers your body and what starts to come up from other people. But it becomes a whole other whirlwind when you start looking at your behaviors and how you have maybe started or have crossed other people's boundaries in the past. And there's a lot of good stuff in here with the examples of like boundary violations where I'm like, oh shit, I'm part of the problem. Just like all this stuff that I like never would have thought, or just like how the mind will run away with. I mean, judging others is a boundary violation. And I'm like, wow, like my mind, like previously when I was younger, just constantly, maybe not so much judging others. It still does judge others, but in the ways that like I'm judging myself. And so I would constantly judge myself all day. And I'm like, well, I'm crossing my own boundaries constantly, like in my mental headspace. And there's so much to all of this.
I mean, yeah, there's people who dedicate their careers to the study of this and to the help and the healing of people's trauma so that they can feel better. That's really why I started this whole journey, was so I can be happy to be alive.
Yeah.
and like really know who I am and not what other people have told me. Because the things that I was programmed with, the beliefs, the how they saw me was not accurate. And I feel like that's just all I've ever wanted, was just to be seen and valued. But when you look to be seen and valued by the blind, you're not going to get your needs met. But if you can learn to see and value yourself for yourself, you don't need anybody else's validation. It doesn't matter a lick what they think about you, because they don't know you. They don't know what you've been through. They don't know your truth. You do, and you should honor that. There's a lot of lessons and growth and love and all of that. So, yeah, that's like the boundaries was like, it was just, it was so huge. It really was like right next to like, it was like meditation and boundaries. Those were, because I needed to ground.
Mm-hmm.
I was so dissociated, like just certain conversations would just like, where'd Nikki go? Like I was just here, but then I was out in space somewhere else. And I'm like, shoot, what were you talking about? It's like, crap, stay here, you know? So there was a lot of like, I was confused. I'm like, why am I like this? What is that about? You know? And this just becomes a lot of questions and curiosity and following the trail.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, yeah, no, I was not my best self right there. I was so triggered. I was out of control. I needed them to be a certain way, and I didn't have, and it's like, so I've learned through all of this, as I'm looking outside, you look inside, because it's all the same. It's all a reflection.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's why with the self-awareness and and removing judgment for it, that's the space where you get to heal it and release it, and it no longer affects you. And this and change is another thing that I want to bring up, because I don't know if you remember hearing this a lot growing up, but I heard it constantly in the 80s and 90s, is that people don't change.
Mm-hmm.
People don't change. Even if it looks like it, they're going to resort back and they're going to be shitheads and all of this other stuff. People don't change. People don't change. People can't change.
I hate that.
Change is bad. Change is bad.
I'm just not a fan of that at all.
I've never liked that. That's so restrictive. That's a prison. When our soul is here to grow and evolve, and the only constant in life is change.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
How is this a belief in our culture? What? And so when you do change, when you heal the things that have been harmed and you've been suffering, and you're like, okay, I'm done with this. I'm so sick of this. I need to do something. And you finally do something, you start showing up differently. You're not as easily triggerable. But when that's been your role, because that was kind of like my role. I was easily triggerable for like a long time. I would be made fun of and teased, and I would be the butt of the joke. And because I would get upset, I would be ridiculed for not being able to handle a joke.
Oh my God, you're speaking my childhood.
Yeah. I forgot actually where I was going. Holy crap. Where was that? What were we talking about? I just triggered myself. That's what happens when the mind is like, when you start saying something and then all of a sudden, poof, it's gone. Sometimes it's just like, your mind is like, no, that's not safe to talk about. Why are you sharing that?
Yep, we're not going to talk about that. Shut down, shut down, shut down.
That's way too vulnerable. You're going to forget everything. Stinking mind.
Well,
it's hilarious.
News to your mind, I remember where we were. So watch out. We were talking about change and how people think that they don't change, or that other people can't change.
And I say, no, that is a lie. But that's what this is about.
Mm-hmm.
When you start showing up differently and you being like, no, you can't, I'm not going to react to that. When you stop reacting, they get mad. Like, what? Like, I just can only think of noises that they be making. But it's like, what? Like, I don't understand.
Yeah.
And they don't like it. They liked having their scapegoat or the person that they would, make feel less than so they can feel more than, because they hate themselves.
Mm-hmm.
When you stop responding to the stimulus, to the trigger, when you are just so secure in who you are that it doesn't matter what anybody says, what they say about you, that's power.
Yeah.
You're reclaiming the power of your emotions, of how you show up in the world. You're no longer reacting to triggers and stimulus. You're going, oh yeah, that's right. That used to make me act like that. How do I want to act right now? Do I want to play? Do I want to participate and like pretend to be all irate and up in arms about this insult? Or do I just want to be neutral and no reaction and see how they respond? But people don't like it. When they have this belief that people don't change and then they see people changing, they want to make them wrong for it.
Yeah. I have a couple things in response to that.
Yeah.
This one's more of just like a broad rhetorical question, I guess. Just a thought. I wonder if the reason why people grasp on to that concept of, oh, people don't change, is it's a reflection of their own ego. It's kind of like taking control and placing an expectation on how other people show up in the world, maybe as like a trauma or like a defense mechanism from the times that maybe they did want the people in their life to show up differently and they didn't. And so is that, I just wonder, like a coping mechanism for the disappointments that they faced for when people maybe didn't show up for them, or when they got treated shittily by someone and they really hoped that they changed, but they didn't. This might totally be a projection.
No, you know what?
But
I feel like that's plausible for a group of people. I think there's lots of reasons. The reason that comes to like my mind in the front is people don't want to. Because in order to change your mind and your life requires a huge amount of effort and energy and work.
Well, they're usually blaming other people for not changing, right?
A lot of times. Or even if they do change. Like
Right.
Let's just think of like addiction. You know what I mean? Like addiction has a lot of biases. When people fall into that dark hole and they continue to harm those, they steal from their family, they behave abhorrently and abusively, and they cause harm to another person. They go through this back and forth of, okay, I'm better, but then I fall off and I fall back, and so it's this back and forth, and so like that I feel like ingrains that belief that people don't really change. But that's also one of the hardest things to come back from.
Yeah.
You know, that's like a whole spiritual crisis. And I think a lot of mental health issues are spiritual crises that we just need to look at and learn how to process. But unfortunately, up to this point, humans have not been the most emotionally mature species.
What?
We're conscious.
What do you
right?
mean?
But we are not emotionally mature. And I've been practicing my emotional maturity, and I'm still I need to get better. Like,
Don't we all?
Yeah. Like I have room to grow. I am much better than I ever used to be. I've gotten a lot stronger in like speaking my needs and my truth and like my process, you know, and taking accountability. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's like, no, I still have room to grow. And that's good. It's okay. I can grow. I can take my time. I don't have to be perfect. I just need to be accountable. And when I mess up, I say, I'm sorry. You know, That's easy for me now. Like, no, that's my bad.
Yeah.
I was not in control.
Yeah. Yeah. The last portion of this book really goes into learning to take accountability and looking more so like at yourself and how you can show up better, not only for yourself, but for the relationships in your life.
Yeah.
And the accountability part is definitely hard, no matter how conscious you are or not. Especially at the beginning, it can start to feel really difficult to own up to where you messed up and to take on accountability. But I guess before, if we do end up talking about that, the gray rock method, as you were just explaining, like how that's like the scientific coined term for when you show up and you don't give any reaction to a person that likes to like push your buttons or that will purposefully trigger you, is you just stay as neutral as you possibly can and don't feed them any satisfaction of it. And then that over time will become the expected and learned behavior. So they have nothing to poke at. So even if you're like not 100% like healed from those triggers, because this is something that I'm in right now where I'm in that spot of awareness of what does trigger me. But in moments that it does get triggered by people, purposeful or not, there are still some people in my life that do purposefully poke my buttons. And that does still trigger me because I'm still working on healing all those times from the past and trying to take the information from it and being like, okay, what is this bringing up within me that I get to heal? That's a whole other tangent.
That's some transmutation shit, by the way. That's what you're talking about, is when you notice, like when you have enough self-awareness and boundaries and space that you're able to recognize when you're triggered, and you get to like take a moment and feel that and be like, what do I want to do with this?
Yeah. Well, that's what I do when I'm in the safety and comfort of myself.
Yes.
But when I'm actually in those situations of getting triggered, that's where it's really difficult for me to not then like act upon my triggers and to not want to just be mad and angry back. So I feel like the gray rock method, it is a bit of acting for a while, but I feel like that's like a great method of the in-between of, okay, I'm still triggerable, but it's like a good like stepping stone while you're on your way to becoming less triggerable. And again, I really can't iterate enough how long of a process this is. And I constantly need this reminder because I'm like, oh my God, boundary work is constantly ongoing. And every single time I interact with somebody, I feel like I'm learning something new about myself and what my boundaries are and what I want my relationships to look like. And like, ooh, this was an interaction that didn't make me feel good. Oh, that's new. And it's like every day is different. But yeah, I just wanted to share that gray rock method.
Yeah, very, very good. What I feel like what that is also doing is allowing you that space to choose. You know, because that's like one of the real benefits of meditation, what it's offered for me, is that as I focus on my breath and be present and feel myself and observe all the things that are happening within and around me, that when I'm in life, I'm walking and I get triggered, I'm able to pause and observe the trigger first. Because if we can get through like the first 30 seconds, you're friggin' golden. If you don't respond or react in like a negative way for 30 seconds, you can very well choose how you want to show up.
Yeah, the response versus the reaction. But it can get so hard.
Oh, man. Especially
in the heat of the
beginning.
moment. Oh, yeah.
Oh, man. It's just practice. It's just like everything else. It's just you get better with practice and opportunities.
Yeah.
But that is true. You said it. Hold on. I feel like highlighting this. The more you observe the triggers and the more you be like, where did that first come in? Because that's the work.
Yeah.
Right? So life comes up, it triggers you. It's triggering you in the present, but it's attached to the past. Because it's telling you this is dangerous, this is wrong, or this is how you're supposed to respond to this. This is a canned response. This is the mind in action.
Yep.
And when the mind is in control, you are not. Your higher self is not. You are at the mercy of your whims, of your anger, you know?
Of your nervous system.
Right. So things that you hate in other people that trigger you, you have it.
Surprise.
You spot it, you got it.
It's a mirror.
If it makes you mad, there's something inside of you that reflects or like relates to that.
Yeah.
And so it's there to bring it to your attention. So don't be mad at the person who's triggering you necessarily. Be like, thanks for showing me what I need to friggin' heal. I need to go meditate or process or journal or talk to my therapist.
Yeah. I was literally about to say like thank them. Because they're giving you a fast track to like what could possibly take years for you if you were isolated by yourself to like find and look inside. But they're just like, oh, I said this one sentence and I have somehow transported you back to when you were like 8 years old and you had this experience with your parents. And it's like, oh shit, I never would have found that on my own. Thank you.
And then once that's healed, once the emotional triggers have been healed and been given space, it won't trigger you anymore.
Yeah.
Nobody can trigger you with that sentence anymore. Like I said, my husband wasn't allowed to say you're acting like a child. But if he would say it now, I don't care because I've healed that. You know what I mean? Because I've done enough work on that where I know. I know how I can be. It's okay.
Yeah.
But I also don't care what anybody else says. That's what I'm working on.
Question.
Mm-hmm.
I am at that point right now where I am trying to show up with that like presence and that awareness in my relationships. So when I do still get triggered, that is the goal, that is the practice. But what's the line between having that presence and that awareness while you're still in relationships that, let's say, are with like a high conflict personality, with somebody who still likes to like poke your buttons or who triggers you on a regular basis? Sorry, I'm trying to find the words to the question because it might be two different questions. But I get hung up sometimes where I'm like, oh, I see the overall, like that higher perspective of, oh, thank you for triggering me. This is what I get to go look at inside of myself. But then there's also the side of me where I have pushed away those relationships for a specific reason because of that. And those relationships aren't feeling very good anymore. And this person's behavior isn't really like vibing with what I want and deserve for myself now. So I guess like what's that? I feel like I'm answering my own question. I think I personally need to set more boundaries in my relationships, in certain relationships. But it's so weird to hold both of those perspectives where it's like my boundaries are getting crossed, but I am also thankful that they're getting crossed because that's helpful information for me. But then do I keep this relationship even though they're regularly crossing my boundaries? Do I stay in it because it's like almost in a selfish way where it's like, oh, this is great growth for me spiritually. I get to look at and heal all of this stuff. But also, wait, they're kind of an asshole and they constantly cross my boundaries. Do you know kind of like what I'm getting at here?
I do.
Like it's really weird. Like it's a strange dichotomy.
Yes.
And I feel like I've been caught there for a while.
Yeah.
End of sentences.
End of questions. Okay, here's what I'm getting as you were speaking that. One, I learned a lot from the book Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents.
Nice.
Amazing, because it helps you understand like the dynamics of what emotional maturity is, and then like how to see like where you grew up and what it looked like and the people it creates. So there's like different roles that are created around this whole thing. And at the end is where it teaches you how to hold some boundaries and how to interact with family that is not on the same healing journey as you. And it really comes down to choice and what's comfortable for you. So, but time boundaries. So like if you have a highly conflicting person, but you need to talk about Thanksgiving dinner and meal planning and stuff, you call with an intention. Hey, just calling to talk about Thanksgiving and the menu. And if they are combative, then you can be like, okay, if you're going to continue this, I can call you back another time. So it's boundary, observation, saying what you're seeing. There's a whole list of things that you can do.
Yeah.
And it becomes... it's a choice of how much time do you want to commit to this? Like how much space do you want to like be triggered in? Because like you're going to appreciate it for a certain time, but if they're not adapting and they're not adjusting to you and where you are and respecting that and listening to be like, I would like it if you didn't say this to me, or if you called me for this reason, or whatever it is that you want. Mm-hmm. If they're not meeting you where you're asking them to, they're just letting you know where they're at. No judgment. They're just not ready to be close. So you can have them a little farther. You know what I mean? We don't need to be connected to anybody who we don't want to. It's not like they're bad people. They're not bad people. They're just not healthy for me. You know?
Yeah.
So it just becomes, it's a case-by-case kind of thing. Are they adapting to your new routine or your new way of being or showing up in the world? Are they being supportive and kind and loving to you? Or are they being harsh and critical? And it's like, what are you willing to receive? Where do you want them? How often would you like to connect? What are you getting out of it? How is it being balanced? I don't want to say what are you getting out of it, because that just sounds like it's transactional. But really, how is the energy being balanced?
Yeah. It is very natural, and I think all of us do. We resource different things from different people in all of our
course,
relationships.
as it should be, because
So-
one person can't handle it all.
Yeah, so it can be transactional. I don't think that's necessarily like a bad thing. I think that's very common. Random side note. It just depends on like the quality of the transactionalness.
I hear what you're saying. I have some issues around that because that is like, it's been conditional. Like transactional means conditional to me.
Oh, okay.
Or like, you know
That
what
conditional
I mean?
versus unconditional love.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so transactional is like, I'll give that to you if you give this to me.
Mhm.
Instead of like, let me just give this to you because I love you.
Right.
Like they expect something in return, even if it's a parent to child, which is stupid. Anyway,
That's fair.
That's just my experience.
This work is hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's very confusing.
And you really feel crazy when you mention like the dichotomy, how you can see two different perspectives at once.
Uh-huh.
Like that's really kind of fucks you up a little bit
Yeah.
because you feel crazy.
Yeah.
Like,
because I don't know what the truth is. Like my mind likes to have one truth, but there are two truths presented in front of me, and I'm like, oh my God.
well, there's one truth per perspective. Each perspective has a truth.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also, what filter did that truth go through? How many wires were crossed in the processing of that truth?
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's important to not judge or not think like you know or control, because like you don't. You can only control yourself. When you're self-aware and you're learning how to show up differently and like stop programs that are running, I would start like getting really up or big or loud or like control, like dominating or like whatever it is like that has triggered me. I'll start with the thing and then I'll see it as it's happening. Oh shit, I'm doing the thing, right? And then I stop it and then I pivot and then I'm like, okay, hold on, let me just take a breath and let me do okay. And then I'll move on and I'll try it again with like, I'm talking mostly about parenting, lots of reparenting with parenting a child. But like, I'll show up not myself. I'll yell because I hate yelling, hate it. And yet I do it. And I'm really harsh, which is so weird, so not mine. But this is something I'm working on getting out. So when I recognize that it's there, I can stop it a lot of times while it's in the middle. And then I'll shift. And that makes me feel crazy because I'm like, my kid's going to grow up thinking my mom is like a raging lunatic 1 second. And then the next second she's calmer. You know what I mean?
Like borderline personality,
yeah, like,
almost.
Like my mom is crazy. And I'm like, no, I'm just healing. And I'm trying to be kind, like and loving and not in my mind. But, yeah, no, there's a lot of feeling crazy when you're doing this work and even with boundaries.
Yeah.
I feel like it's just part of the territory.
Yeah.
Because it's hard when you can see so many different perspectives. And that's like part of the work is getting farther away, not so in it, where you can see where it's coming from. You can see how it started and you can treat for it. But you feel crazy. So just know that's normal.
Yeah.
So
Again.
that's a good sign.
Yeah.
If you feel crazy, if you're on a healing journey and you feel crazy,
You're doing it right.
good job. Keep going.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah. Like we mentioned in the beginning, I mean, the society that we live in, it just nobody or hardly any people are out there using the same language or working on their own boundaries. And if nobody else is doing it, I feel like that's just like the natural response that we have is to feel like we're the crazy ones.
Well, you
And
are
it's-
to them.
Yeah.
It is crazy to be doing this, just to change things, to like, it's working. Why would you want to change it? Well, it's working for some people, but other people are suffering because of it. And I do feel like this is becoming more out there,
Yes.
like in
it
the
is,
world. Like people
thankfully.
are doing this. They are waking up. They are breaking those generational cycles.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's partly what we're doing here, though, is to bring it more into the space. Just speak it. Get people thinking about it or looking at it or considering it or inspired or not. I don't care. Like, whatever. You
Yeah.
don't got to do anything for me to be okay.
It's funny. Boundaries, literally, they're here to help everyone.
Mm-hmm.
That's where
Keep
it's
everyone
like,
safe.
Yeah, exactly. I have a few people in the back of my mind who, whenever I talk about like boundaries or like more of this kind of like touching the surface of this kind of internal, more like spiritual work, they'll very much so like scoff and be like, like boundaries? Ugh, ew, I don't need therapy. Like that's for like broken people. And I'm just like, not that I feel sad for them, but it's like boundaries aren't just for super sensitive people.
Mm-hmm.
They're for literally anyone and
Humans?
everyone. Every single human.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't understand why people have such an aversion, because it's literally, you get to feel in your body what rules feel good to you. And then you get to have the choice for what your world looks like. It's like building your own little beautiful world. And it's fabulous. And it feels so much better once you have more practice setting them and building that world that you want around you. But I don't think my dad would ever listen to this, but I have my dad very much in mind right now when I'm saying all of this. But I'm like, homeboy, like these boundaries would help you too. It's just interesting, the aversion in the world right now to this work. But we are getting there, and we're sharing the information, and I'm sure anybody listening to this is sharing the information and figuring it out for themselves and doing the work, and that's fucking beautiful.
It is.
I think we're all doing a great job.
These are great. Boundaries are amazing. But can you also see the threat that they pose?
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
Because,
I mean, like, I get it.
Right.
Like, I get all sides of it. Like, I've been there. It's all a mirror. It's all within me, too. My ego is also like, man, I don't want to follow your boundaries. That's so rigid. Ugh, get out of here. What do you mean I can't do this thing that I used to do all the time that you used to be okay with? Meh, change, weird. I get it.
Yeah. When structures break down, it doesn't like it. When programs break down, when society and the culture and the status quo is threatened, there's going to be lashback. There's going to be pushback, because there's a number of people who are directly benefiting from people being disempowered. And what boundaries offer are respect and to be treated respectfully or carefully and equally. And that has not been a thing in the patriarchy the last 5,000 years, because it's been about power and dominance and control and disempowering others and stealing it and using it for themselves. And
our systems are set up completely boundaryless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Across all fronts.
Yeah.
Systemically.
It's like, oh, no, I want that. I'm going to take it because I'm bigger than you, or I'm more powerful, or I have an army, or I have a penis. Like, I'm just going to take that.
Yeah.
You can't say no to me. Don't you know?
Yeah.
This is how it is. I'm bigger, I'm better. Like, no.
Governmentally speaking, too. Like, oop, you're gay, you can't get married. Oop, you're trans, fuck your pronouns. That's all just giant systemic boundary crossing and violations.
It's like, what is really wrong with allowing people to be their authentic self? What is wrong with allowing people to tell you who they are? Who are you? Who is anybody to tell anybody else who they are? Unless you're like the biggest visionary seer, spiritual guru who's so connected to spirit they can see everything so clearly. Otherwise, I don't trust you. I don't trust that you can see me. Like, what is wrong with this? What is so threatening? But people are so afraid. They're so afraid of the ego death, of certain securities being threatened, a foundation, belief systems. Their whole identity is threatened when people change and want to do this and be called, you know what I mean? Like, they don't know what to do with themselves.
Yeah.
They don't have any adaptive energy.
Yeah. And it's so hard because all of that, on top of already those ego or those terrifying things to the ego, it's all happening on such an unconscious level that they're not even processing that.
Right.
And so there's really no room.
And that, again, brings it right back around to self-awareness. Why do you believe the things you believe? This is what the question is that people need to be asking themselves. Why do you believe that? Do you actually? Do you want to?
Yeah. How does it feel in your body to believe that?
I don't have a lot of beliefs, because the beliefs to me feel rigid, and that's identifying. But I'm constantly changing and evolving and growing. So it's flexible. I have ideas. I heard this somewhere. I forget where I heard it. I don't have beliefs. I have ideas.
I like that.
There's somebody famous. No quoting, but as a concept, I really like that.
That does feel a lot more flexible and open.
Because when you challenge someone's beliefs, whether it's religious or political or spiritual or anything like that,
It's a death to their identity.
it is a death to their identity. That you are threatening to kill everything that they believe about themselves. But then that's because people don't change. You're not allowed to change your thoughts or your feelings or your ideas or your ideologies. But as humans, our number one survival mechanism is adaptiveness. To be able to adapt to the environment, which is why we all have different skin tones. It's not because we're different animals. It's because our genetics and our ancestors grew up in a certain part of the planet that had extra UV light and they needed more protection. That is it.
Yep.
That is just an evolutionary, adaptive friggin' thing that has been used to separate and segregate and make a less than party.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I feel like we can definitely,
Oh, wow.
for sure, chat more about this. I think we're gonna slowly wrap up. Maybe not slowly. We are wrapping up
Wrapping up. Okay.
at least the first portion of this boundaries conversation. But yeah, so this has been part 1. I hope there has been hopefully maybe some new information, or just anybody out there who is just as confused and on this boundary learning path as we are found some sort of resonance and connection.
Yes.
This is huge. This is very long-term work, and our boundaries change every day, and our needs change every day. And it's all part of being a human, being a soul in a human body, experiencing this life. But we do have the power to create the life that we do want, and the power to cultivate the relationships that are really fulfilling and that we want for ourselves. We do have that power. And we can choose awareness and unconditional love for ourselves and others.
And so it is.
And so it is.
Thank you again for listening, everyone. If you're interested in diving deeper into the boundary conversation with us, then tune into the next episode where we discuss real-life boundary applications and look at some of the initial feelings and challenges of showing up in new ways for yourself. In the meantime, have a splendid week.